Hi everyone, I'm Jack from Peach Guitars and welcome to another episode of Board Talk. In today's video, what I'm going to do is show you through a few pedals that claim to be Marshall in a box. Some of these are overtly Marshall in a box pedals, other ones can be coaxed into doing that job for you if you want. But before I get into this video, I want to please remind you to like it, comment down below with your thoughts, and make sure that you're subscribed to the Peach Guitars YouTube channel. Okay, so today's subject is Marshall in a box type pedals. This is a subject that a lot of people ask about. It's a very popular field of overdrive and distortion pedals. And I actually think that there's quite a few underdogs in this particular category. There's a lot of big name pedals out there that a lot of people refer to in this kind of camp. But what I think gets a little bit less attention is the lower gain side of things. So there's more vintage Marshall tones. Everyone knows that the hot rodded Marshall thing that was very popular throughout the 70s and 80s is great, and there's lots of pedals that do that. But there's a whole segment I think that often gets overlooked, which is this, which is what I'm going to touch on today. I've got 6 pedals here that will all do the job of basically making your amp think that it's acting like a low gain Marshall, a classic Marshall. Some of these pedals are distinctly Marshall amp copies, so they're specifically going for that task itself, but there's other pedals I've got here that I'm going to come on to that actually do a lot more than I'm giving them credit for in this video, but they can do a mean Marshall if you want them to do that. All the tones today are going to be played on this Sir Classic Antique S guitar into a semi-clean Dr. Z Maz 18. As with all drive pedals, I think that pedals like this kind of excel and are at their best when the amplifier has a little bit of drive in the preamp section, or just a little bit of compression, though a lot of these pedals, because they've got very powerful EQs on them, will work into either completely clean amplifiers or fairly overdriven amps as well. So I'm kind of gone for the middle ground with an amp that's just on the edge of breaking up, and I think that's what most people look to do when they're using their pedal boards in that way. Okay, so I want to start right here, which is one of my very favourite drive pedals in the world. This is the JHS Charlie Brown. This is the version 4 of this pedal, and it's kind of reached its ultimate state now, I think. Basically, the Charlie Brown is JHS pedals' take on capturing a JTM 45 Marshall tone, which is to say a very early, fairly low gain, and actually surprisingly warm and dynamic kind of a Marshall tone. So this isn't going for those screaming high gain things. I've kind of set it for a very low to mid gain, very rich sound that responds very well to the guitar volume. You've got a 3-band active EQ, which boosts and cuts certain frequencies, so I'm using it to kind of boost up the treble a little bit and pull back on the lows and the mids. The drive is around 2/3 of the way up, and I think this is where it sounds its best, because it sounds most like you've plugged into a Marshall JTM and just turned it up to around 6 or 7, which is kind of the magic sweet spot a lot of the time. When you crank this thing up though, it gets into kind of more fuzzy kind of a territory, which I actually think sounds really good. I think it sounds very much like a proper Marshall amp, and it just transforms whatever you're plugging into that classic JTM sound. Alright, so next along I've got this, which is the J-Rocket 45. This is another one of my favourite drive pedals. You actually may have heard this in quite a few of the older Peach listing demos. I used to use this all the time, This is just such a great overdrive pedal. It's very similar in its nature to the Charlie Brown in that it's going after a JTM 45 kind of a tone, implied by the name. This pedal sounds a little bit harder edge, and I kind of think of it as like the kind of the Malcolm Young to the Charlie Brown's Hendrix tones, if you want to use an analogy. But basically this pedal goes for the same kind of era of Marshall tones. It's got quite a bit more gain on tap, and you've still got a very similar level of functionality by way of a treble and bass control independently rather than just a tone. I actually also really like the way that the Rocket pedals in general sound. I think they've got a kind of general brand theme. There's a little bit more mid-range in this pedal. You've got the top mounted jacks, which is very useful on a pedal board, and this thing is built like an absolute tank, so it's certainly going to earn its place on your pedal board if you choose to use it there. Alright, so moving on to the newest addition in terms of brands to our store. From Zevex I've got the Box of Rock, and this is the original horizontal pedal format. There is also a vertical version available if you want to be a little bit more pedalboard conscious. Sounds exactly the same as this. This is one of the biggest hitters for Zevex pedals, in fact, because basically this is Zachary Vex's take on a JTM 45 once again. And what you've actually got here, as opposed to any of the other pedals, is two different functions. So you've got the drive circuit, which sounds very much like a classic JTM. It's got quite a lot of low end, this pedal, so if you're looking to beef up maybe a Strat into a clean amp tone, this pedal does that very well. But it also works with an amp, as I've got here today, that's breaking up as well. But interestingly enough, that second function I talked about is this boost circuit, which you can use independently, and I believe it comes after the drive circuit, so if you want a lead boost built in, you've got that right here as well. So this is a great sounding pedal, really dynamic once again, and the way this is designed, I think this works a little bit more in a dynamic way, so you can really work the guitar volume, and with those two switchable gain levels that you've got here with the boost as well, this is probably one of the most versatile Marshall type pedals you'll find. Okay, so I want to move on to a pedal now that does not claim to specifically recreate a Marshall in a box type thing. However, this is from Friedman. Dave Friedman is known as the modern day king of the Marshall type amp and pedal, and his pedal lineup often consists of Marshall type overdrive. So the Golden Pearl is his one of his more recent takes on kind of getting a low to mid gain natural breakup kind of a sound. I believe this is actually designed primarily to work with an already overdriven amp, just to boost it a little further, but it sounds fantastic into a clean or semi-clean amp as well. So you've got a couple of different voicing options, as well as a global high cut feature, which is really useful for many different types of amps. And the way I'm using this today is quite a low gain, kind of a breakup tone. It's kind of similar, I think, to the Charlie Brown in the way that it's got that same kind of gain structure to it. But being a Friedman product, it sounds a little bit more refined, a little bit more modern maybe. But you can kind of rest assured that this is one of the most versatile offerings here, because it doesn't just do the standalone drive thing, it also works well as a boost into a driven amp. Or you could use it to really get some high gain tones if your amp already has a fair bit of gain on it as well. But one of the most versatile pedals here, but it still nails that low gain Marshall, kind of verging more into a plexi than a JTM kind of a tone, but I think it does it really well. Okay, so another brand favourite here, Cattle Inbred pedals. This is their dirty little secret, and this is one of the best Marshall in a box type pedals around. It goes for more of the early 70s super lead tone than the mid 60s JTM and early plexi things, so it's a little bit harder edged. It's also got quite a lot of low end on this pedal, so I've dialed quite a lot of that back, but once again, great for if you've got single coil pickups and you really need to beef up the tone. You've got a lot of tone shaping here via another 3-band EQ. And you actually got quite a lot of gain available as well, as it's going for more of a 70s Marshall thing. So while I wouldn't classify this as a hot rodded sound, it straddles the line nicely between the real classic vintage Marshall tones, as well as being able to cop some of the higher gain things as well if you want to use it that way. But as always with all these pedals, this cleans up very well on the guitar volume. It does sound generally thicker overall, so I think it has more of a drastic change on your tone when you turn this on. It's not as subtle as some of these other pedals might be if you want to use it that way. But in terms of what it says on the tin, this will transform any amp into a Marshall Super Lead, no question. Alright, so last of all, I've got arguably one of the most popular overdrive pedal circuits ever devised. This is the OCD from Full Tone. This particular one that I've got is the Germanium custom shop version, so there's a couple of little circuit tweaks in this pedal that I think aligns it more closely with the other offerings I've got here today. The OCD, once again, does not claim to specifically be a Marshall in a box type pedal, but a lot of players use it that way. They'll use it into a clean amp, and particularly using the high peak mode on this pedal, it has that nice mid-rangey snarl to it that a lot of Marshall type amps do. You've also got, though, in the low peak mode, a much more dynamic and flat response kind of a sound. So you can really make this work with any amp. This Germanium version has a little bit of a softer attack. It cleans up a little bit better as well. and I think that it sits very nicely alongside some of these other pedals I've shown you in just giving you the ultimate dynamic guitar experience, while also giving you plenty of gain on tap if you want to do that as well. So there we are, folks. I hope you've enjoyed another little pedal shootout. These little roundups are not intended to compare anything against the other. You know, nothing is better or worse here. There's simply 6 different variants on a theme. They've all got their own merits. They've all got their own strengths. Whatever your own personal rig might be, I'm sure there's at least one pedal of these 6 that will find its place on your pedal board very comfortably. So there we are. If you want to find out any more information about any of these pedals or any of the other pedals from these brands, you can do so by clicking the link in the description below and going to peachguitars.com. So until next time, take care of yourselves. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any future content from us. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.